USA and Houthi
But
ceasefire.
here's where
How
it gets
does
really
this
interesting
affect
and frankly
Israel's
a bit
plans?
tangled. What does this agreement, which is mostly about, the Red Sea shipping lanes, what does it actually mean for the Israel-Iran relationship? That's already incredibly tense.
That's exactly the question we need to dig into because
Yeah.
this ceasefire, even though it seems localized to Yemen and the Red Sea,
Mhm.
it really has the potential to shift the power dynamics across the Middle East, especially when you look at Israel and Iran.
Precisely. So for this deep dive, we've gathered some really compelling sources. We've got the news reports, of course, laying out the ceasefire details, who agreed what, where it applies. Exactly. But maybe more importantly, we're also looking at this quite sharp analysis from Dr. Raja King and Dr. Abdul Adam. Their paper really helps connect the dots. It looks specifically at how this ceasefire might influence that Israel-Iran dynamic.
And crucially, it considers the Houthi attacks on Israel, which, and this is absolutely key, are explicitly not part of this U.S. Houthi deal.
That's the kicker, isn't it? It shows just how interconnected all this is. It's not some neat, isolated agreement. It's one piece in a much bigger, much messier puzzle of regional rivalries and, well, strategic games.
hmm So our goal today is to really try and understand the fallout from this U.S. Houthi ceasefire. For Israel, for Iran, looking at the deal itself, what the Houthis are still doing, and the geopolitical takes from our sources.
All right, let's dive right in. King and Adams' analysis, it hits this point hard right away. Israel's vulnerability to Houthi attacks. It might have actually increased because of this ceasefire. That sounds backwards, doesn't it? How can a ceasefire make things more vulnerable?
Well, the main reason is that Israel is explicitly carved out of this agreement. Houthi officials, we're talking top figures, like Mohammed Abdul Salam, the chief negotiator, and Mahdi al-Mashat, a key political leader, they've been crystal clear.
What have they said?
They've stated quite unequivocally that their deal with the U.S. has zero impact on their military operations against Israel. Some statements even hinted they might step those attacks up.
Wow. That's pretty
Huh?
blunt. And it's not just talk, is it? We saw just before the ceasefire was announced May 4th that Houthi ballistic missile strike landed alarmingly close to Ben Gurion Airport.
That's right. 8 people injured, major disruption of flights. It's a stark reminder they can reach Israel effectively.
Definitely underscores the capability.
And the analysis we're looking at really highlights the kind of weapons the Houthis have now. A lot of it's supplied by Iran, of course. We're talking advanced stuff.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like the Tufan missile that's precision-guided, range about 1,800 kilometers, and sophisticated drones like the Wa'id, which can apparently fly up to 2,500 kilometers.
Okay, so those ranges easily cover significant parts of Israel. You can see why security concerns there would be amplified.
Absolutely. And then you have the U.S. factor.
Right, the U.S. bombing campaign against the Houthis that was retaliation for the Red Sea shipping attacks that stopped now as part of the ceasefire. Doesn't that leave Israel feeling a bit exposed? Like they're facing this Houthi threat more alone?
That's a really critical point. Stopping those U.S. strikes, it removes a sort of indirect layer of pressure that was helping Israel, even if unintentionally. So yeah, it's understandable there's anxiety in Israel about this, a feeling that maybe the U.S. isn't as focused on pushing back against Iran's whole axis of resistance.
The network of proxies, with the Houthis being a major one.
Exactly.
And this feeling, this perceived shift in U.S. priorities, that leads directly to the next major point, doesn't it? The strain this puts on the U.S.-Israel relationship itself. Reports suggest Israel wasn't thrilled with how this all went down.
No, indeed. Sources indicate there was surprise, maybe even frustration in Israeli government circles about the U.S. decision, the timing, the apparent lack of deep consultation beforehand. It raised some eyebrows.
So the interpretation in Israel, according to the analysis, might be that the U.S. put its economic interests first here. Securing the Red Sea shipping lanes took precedence over Israel's immediate security concerns regarding the Houthis.
That's certainly one interpretation being discussed, yes. That the immediate economic stability in the Red Sea was perhaps the primary driver for the U.S. in this instance.
And is there a worry this signals something bigger, a potential shift in how the U.S. approaches Iran more broadly?
That is a significant undercurrent of concern in Israel, yes. The analysis points to fears that this ceasefire could be a sign, maybe, of the U.S. being more willing to talk to Iran directly, perhaps through those Oman-mediated channels about the nuclear program.
And the fear there is?
The worry is that any U.S.-Iran dialogue might lead to concessions that, inadvertently help Iran strengthen its regional position and leave Israel feeling more isolated strategically.
Okay, let's pivot to Tehran. How did Iran react to this ceasefire? Sounds like they welcomed it.
Oh, absolutely. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson was quite public about welcoming the ceasefire. They framed it as an end to, quote, U.S. aggression in Yemen.
Which sounds like a diplomatic win for them.
It's widely seen that way, yes. It bolsters Iran's regional standing, and they didn't have to give up anything directly. It takes the pressure off their Houthi allies, essentially.
And this breathing room for the Houthis? It lets them concentrate their efforts. And let's be frank, their Iranian-supplied weapons squarely on Israel.
Precisely. The analysis really underscores how this fits perfectly into Iran's longer-term playbook, using proxies to exert indirect pressure on Israel. The Houthis are often mentioned as a key part of this ring of fire strategy.
Alongside groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza.
Exactly. It allows Iran to challenge Israel without a direct state-on-state military clash. It stretches Israel thin, forces them to defend on multiple fronts, creates strategic headaches.
And we have to remember, Iran's actual support, the missiles, the drones, the IRGC training that flow isn't affected by this U.S. Houthi ceasefire at all, right?
Correct. That pipeline remains open, which naturally increases Iran's leverage and makes it totally understandable why Israel views Iran as the main actor here. The head of the octopus, as the analysis puts it, a very evocative phrase.
It is, and this whole dynamic, it just feels ripe for escalation, doesn't it? Wider regional escalation. Israel's already shown it will hit back. That reported airstrike on Sana'a International Airport right after the ceasefire announcement.
Yes, and the reported damage was substantial. That demonstrates Israel's willingness to retaliate directly against Houthi assets in Yemen.
But the Houthi response to that strike wasn't exactly backing down. They vowed to intensify operations against Israel. That sounds like a dangerous tit-for-tat cycle.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And Iran's role here is, well, interesting. They publicly support the Houthis, champion their cause, but consistently deny direct involvement in the specific attacks on Israel.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. But that doesn't make Israel feel any less threatened. In fact, it might increase the perceived threat because they feel they're dealing with an Iranian-orchestrated campaign, just executed by proxies.
Okay, let's dig a bit more into the Houthis themselves. What's their motivation for these attacks on Israel beyond just being an Iranian ally?
Well, their own stated reasons, according to the analysis, tie directly back to the conflict in Gaza. They consistently frame their attacks as solidarity with the Palestinians. They call for a ceasefire in Gaza and end to the blockade.
And their slogan, death to America, death to Israel, that's pretty explicit about their ideology.
It is. It clearly shows the deep-seated animosity that underpins their actions, alongside the stated goal of supporting Palestinians.
And the sheer number of attacks since October 2023, it's quite something. Over 60 ballistic missiles, more than 300 drones. We saw spikes late last year, early this year. It's not just symbolic pot shots.
No, not at all. The frequency, the persistence, it shows a very deliberate, sustained campaign.
The analysis reminds us of specific incidents, too, like that tragic drone strike in Tel Aviv back in July 2024 that killed someone.
Right, and the more recent Ben Gurion strike. These have real, serious consequences, even if many get intercepted.
Absolutely. And even the intercepted ones have a strategic impact.
How so? You mean the cost?
Partly the cost, yes. There's a huge cost disparity. A relatively cheap Houthi drone or missile forces Israel to use very expensive interceptors. That's a win in asymmetric warfare, draining the enemy's resources.
Makes sense.
But it's also about exposing vulnerabilities. Even the best defenses aren't foolproof. And psychologically, it keeps the pressure on. Plus, the sheer range is significant. Yeah, launching from Yemen, over 1,600 miles away. That really highlights the capability Iran has helped them build. You mentioned those advanced drones like the Wa'id.
Precisely. The provision of weapons like the Quds-2 missile, the Samad-3 and Samad-4 drones, Iran has significantly boosted their reach and sophistication. It makes defending against them much harder for Israel.
So by keeping up these attacks after the U.S. ceasefire, the Houthis are basically maintaining that pressure on Israel, which seems to align perfectly with Iran's wider goals.
That's the key takeaway from that angle, yes. It forces Israel to divert military resources, attention, manpower. They have to worry about Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen. It stretches them thin, potentially weakens their overall deterrence.
And what about the Houthis themselves? What do these attacks do for them beyond the Iran connection, domestically in Yemen or regionally?
Well, domestically, the analysis suggests these actions really boost their legitimacy, especially in the areas they control. By framing themselves as champions of the Palestinian cause, standing up to Israel and the U.S., they rally support. It strengthens their authority at home.
And regionally, within